You're watching CT23 with Eric Parker.
Welcome back. Channel 3 meteorologist Mike Slifer is here now to talk about all things weather. That's good because you're a meteorologist. So what else will we talk to you about?
Right. I could tell you a thing or two about cars, but...
Here's what I know. I know that news anchors should stay the heck out of the weather, and I shouldn't give any forecasting, so I'm smart enough to do that. But here's what I've noticed.
Yes.
It seems like we're in some kind of weird cycle, Mike, some weird pattern where we keep getting like these rainy, gloomy, thunderstormy days. What's going on?
Yes, so June gloom is how people have been describing this, and that's exactly what it feels like. We have a reason for that. Here's what the overarching pattern has been. So there's a big area of high pressure that's built up over Texas right now, and that is going to be the big player in this role. And the reason for that is because it blocks up the pattern, and so we end up with this almost stagnant area of low pressure over us. And that's the case for the West Coast, too. We call this an omega block because it's sort of shaped like the Greek letter omega. And earlier this summer, and into the spring, rather, we had this high pressure over the eastern U.S. And it allowed us to enjoy quite a bit of dry time. April, May, June were all pretty dry. Well, the first part of the month.
Yep.
And then things gradually became more unsettled, and now we're sort of stuck in limbo with this pattern, and it looks like this unfortunately could be what we're going to be dealing with moving forward.
Because it has felt a lot like, you know, we've had days where it wasn't all that hot, but it was really humid. It's been cloudy a lot. There's been kind of drizzly days, and is that sort of all the result of that block? Yes,
so that big area of low pressure that's somewhat stagnant, it meanders a bit here and there, and every now and again it'll briefly move out. We get a sunny day in between, and then it's right back to more of the same. That is the driver for all of the weather that we've seen, and so it means clouds, it means showers. If we get enough sunshine, it means thunderstorms, sometimes severe weather. We've had some very strong thunderstorms throughout the month of June, and again, this looks like something that we will continue through July, and who knows, maybe even into August.
And sometimes those severe storms with the heavy, heavy rain, people just in their head, they think, okay, I remember getting soaked running to my car, so I think it's been wet. Where are we with drought?
Yes, we are still abnormally dry across a lot of Connecticut, but we're not necessarily concerned about it because of the fact that we're in such an active pattern. If we saw a pattern unfolding that was like every day is going to be 90 and sunny and dry, and we were abnormally dry, we'd be like, not great. But, you know, we've had thunderstorms, we've had showers. Some areas of Connecticut have really seen a surplus of rain throughout the month of June because of that. Very hit or miss, feast or famine, if you will. So we're not too concerned about the overall pattern just yet. If something shifts and for some reason we don't end up with a very active July, and August turns out to be very hot and dry, then, you know, we might have some more concerns. Right.
And we just watch for that shift to happen. We watch for the long-range forecast. What will you be watching for?
Yes, so a little inside baseball here. Usually when we're talking about the forecast, you know, a couple days in advance, we really can get into the nitty-gritty of it. We're expecting showers between specific times. We're expecting thunderstorms at this time in this part of the state. Whereas when you're talking about a week, 2 weeks out, a month out, you look at sort of the overarching pattern. So we just talked about that omega block that's in place for us right now. High pressure over Texas sort of controlling everything. The question, of course, is what happens beyond that. And again, there are some signals that this pattern is going to be somewhat established. The other thing we have to watch for is blocking over Canada. If that sets up in the right spot, that could actually help us. If it sets up in the wrong spot, it could hurt us. That also means that we could end up in a similar pattern to what we saw in the spring, which for Canada would mean more wildfires. So those are the things that are on our radar. No pun intended, as we get into the second half of summer through July and August.
Well, let's take that transition. We saw those days where we had that high smoke in, you know, at some points down to ground level, other times just kind of blocking the view of the sky. We have some pictures here when that was an issue. Are we concerned? Certainly if the wildfires pick up, that would be a concern, but moving forward, is that something we should be watching?
So there's a couple of things at play here. One is that the fires that we're burning, some of them still not contained. There's still a lot of fire activity in Canada. If another hot, dry pattern ends up setting up over Canada, which there are some signals that would be possible, we could be talking about another extended fire season for them. If the wind for us becomes more of a northwest wind, then we start talking about just persistent days where we start to slowly transport that smoke to us. You know, earlier in the year, we talked about New York City having some of the worst air quality in the world. And if these wildfires continue as they're forecast to or expected to, which I'm not a fireologist.
Sure.
We can't predict wildfires, but, you know, looking at the weather patterns, this is something that is going to be a topic of conversation. Will it be for us in Connecticut? Tough to say.
Well, let me ask you, though, because you're a Connecticut kid, I'm a Connecticut kid. I also anchored the news here for 10 years. I don't ever recall this happening. Was this a thing and I just didn't realize it, and that smoke from fires came before, or this is super weird?
The magnitude of it and the duration of it, pretty weird. July of 2002 is the only time that was even comparable to what we experienced, where we had thick smoke at ground level, and even that was much shorter lived than what we've seen. The weather pattern over Canada throughout the spring was pretty anomalous. The high pressure that was there, dry, hot, not great. Remember, in Canada, some things don't even bloom until the end of May or June. So we talk about green up here happening in April. They're 6 weeks behind us. So they end up with these hot, dry days, and everything is still just, there's fuel everywhere. So these fires can really get going, and then at that point, it's difficult for them to put out. So the duration is certainly a bit strange, yes.
We only have about 30 seconds left, but I wanted to ask you to do what you just told me you can't do, and that's look into the future. So we've got the hurricane season, and we've got the rest of the summer. 30 seconds, can you give us any thoughts on what we should watch for?
Hurricane season looking about normal. Some competing factors, usually El Nino years are not as great for hurricane development, but the oceans are so warm, and we've already seen activity, so we expect that to sort of continue. As far as our weather goes, it really depends on how the pattern sets up. But if we keep this blocky pattern around, which is typical of El Nino years sometimes, we could end up with a summer very similar to 2009. If you recall, that was a very gloomy summer.
Okay, I don't recall, probably because it was gloomy and I was miserable, but we'll just have to keep tuning in, because like you said, every 3 or 4 days out, you can give us a better idea. So just watch Mike Slifer all the time.
Yeah, that's how I like it.
Problem solved. Mike, thanks for coming on CT23.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, she's written dozens of books, selling millions of copies, with many becoming New York Times bestsellers. And lucky for us, she's sharing her summer book recommendations written by her favorite authors. Luann Rice joins us in Studio B, coming up next in our Sunday Spotlight.